In Manila, the Philippines National Bureau of Investigation has issued its report on the confrontation between a Taiwanese fishing boat and a Philippine Coast Guard vessel last May. A Taiwanese fisherman was shot and killed in the incident.
All 8 personnel, therefore, can be held liable for the death of the Taiwanese fisherman. The NBI report recommends that criminal charges of homicide be filed against these 8 PCG personnel.
This dramatic video from the Philippines patrol ship shows part of the confrontation in waters between Taiwan and the Philippines. The investigation showed the Philippine Coast Guardsmen failed to observe the rules of engagement when they suspected illegal fishing. The report said their lives were not in danger. They also tried to cover up the fact that they fired more than 100 rounds at the Taiwanese boat. The incident damaged relations between Manila and Taipei. Taipei imposed economic sanctions on the Philippines. Japan launched its biggest warship since World War II this week. It's a helicopter carrier named Izumo. The ship is capable of carrying 9 helicopters. According to the Japanese, it will be used for humanitarian missions and anti-submarine warfare. The Izumo's launch was given lots of publicity, and Chinese media took notice. China has a territorial dispute with Japan. This man said that even if the carrier is not used for attack, it is good for deterrence. The Izumo has the same name as a warship that the old Japanese Imperial Navy used from 1900 to 1945. That Izumo was involved in the invasion of China during World War II. Relations between Japan and China have steadily declined over the past year, largely due to territorial disputes. Diplomacy has taken on a frosty tone. Researchers in both countries wanted to know how citizens feel. They say the recent survey reveals more than 90% of Japanese and Chinese have negative feelings for each other. The survey was jointly conducted by a Japan-based NGO and the official party newspaper, China Daily. So why do Chinese and Japanese have such bad impressions of each other? 53% of Japanese and 78% of Chinese say that the dispute over what China calls the Diaoyu and Japan calls the Senkaku Islands fuel the mutual dislike. Wartime history is the second highest reason for the sore feelings. Almost half of Japanese say they don't like Chinese criticizing them over the past. 64% of Chinese feel that Japan's apology for its invasion of their country isn't good enough. On the possibility of a military dispute in the East China Sea, 53% of the Chinese polled say such an incident is likely in the future, but a much smaller portion of Japanese polled, only 24%, worry about a confrontation at sea. The two countries normalized relations in 1972, but territorial disputes and history continue to hamper efforts to improve ties. Analysts in Japan and China believe both countries use the territorial issue to rally public support for their domestic policies. And speaking of molding public opinion, this order came down from China's State Council Information Office earlier this month. For the next 48 hours, the order said all media websites must prominently display this Xinhua editorial titled "Upheaval would leave China in a more tragic state than the Soviet Union" on their homepages. These are important instructions from a key comrade in central leadership. All websites must strictly comply. The editorial says that when Soviet people truly awaken to democratization and universal values of happiness, those are code words for Western ideas, by the way, the Soviets discovered that GDP had fallen by half, new domestic oligarchs plundered state assets, Russians lined up on the street during supply shortages, and veterans had to sell their medals in exchange for bread. It went on to indicate that China would suffer a worse tragedy if it adopted democracy and Western values. Users of the microblog site Weibo, China's equivalent of Twitter, jumped in. Here are a few comments. An economist mockingly posted 6 points about the Russian tragedy. First, free universal medical service. Second, free pre-college education and free school lunch. Then women over 55, men over 60 receive pension, whether they've worked for the government or not. Water, electricity, heating are paid by the government. Average income, $12,700 US. For Chinese, $1,000 US. He ended ironically, what's even worse, Russians can vote. This post read, "The article is all subjective assumptions and conjecture. It does not take into consideration the true aspirations of the Russian people. As the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says, it harms Russians' feelings." And entrepreneur Kai-Fu Lee, who has 51 million followers, wrote the editorial, ignored another example of political change. Why don't they say if political reform would make China a happy place like Taiwan?
Now on U.S. airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.